a responsive turnaround strategy that must give confidence not only to advertisers, not only to people who are listening to SABC, but to government and everyone that in the next 5 years or 3 years, SABC will not come back and ask for a bailout. That's very crucial because we're talking about the taxpayers.
The Minister of Communications talking to Parliament during the week. Good evening and welcome to Unfiltered on SABC 3 and Channel 404. I'm Desiree Chowke. Tonight, in the latest on the SABC, the Times Live newspaper reports that Finance Minister Tito Mboweni has declined to give the cash-strapped public broadcaster much-needed government guarantee to enable it to stay on air. Communications Minister Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams was apparently informed of this in a two-page letter dated the 25th of June 2019, which was seen by the newspaper. Invitations to the SABC management, the Minister and the Portfolio Committee on Communications on this issue have been declined. Amongst its multiple challenges, the SABC owes suppliers about 1.9 billion rands. Its buildings now pose an occupational health and safety risk to employees after many years of maintenance, or no maintenance rather. There are further fears the broadcaster may not be able to pay its workers if the bailout is not forthcoming. This could jeopardize thousands of livelihoods. Media experts say this does not bode well for democracy, as it could silence the voices of citizens and restrict their right to participate in our democracy, leaving them with the inability to influence policy. What is your take? Tonight we're joined in the studio by William Bird, who is the Director at Media Monitoring Africa. We also have Makosini Mgejwa, who is a political commentator, and Aubrey Shabalala is the Secretary General of the Communication Workers Union. We'll also be joined on the line by the senior journalist at Sunday Times who authored the SABC story, Mpumzi Zuzile. Tonight's question is, can we afford a failed SABC? Do participate in tonight's program on Facebook and Twitter using our hashtag at SABC News Unfiltered and SABC News Online. Gentlemen, thank you so much for honoring the invitation. Perhaps let's start with you, Mark Kosini. We totally understand the minister wants to do things by the book, but do you think that government is faithful in its interactions with the SABC, the SABC COO, Mr. Craig Van Rooyen, saying that a turnaround strategy is a conversation with board and not necessarily has to be approved by Treasury?
Look, I think, you know, the problems that the SABC is facing, in as far as I'm concerned, are structural in nature, in that, you know, as a public entity, it's not free to do business like, you know, independent broadcasters can. But also there's a problem of political interference at the SABC, which is toxic for the SABC.
Let's just stay with the structural bit for a bit. Why would then Treasury come back and complain about the business structure of the SABC? They're saying that the current structure of the business model doesn't work.
Look, I mean, I don't think that the model works, quite frankly. I mean, of the top 10 radio stations in South Africa, only one, Gagasi FM, is not owned by the SABC. The SABC shouldn't be bankrupt. The SABC shouldn't be asking for money from anyone. So you've got these structural problems, you've got incompetence sometimes, right at the top levels of the SABC, and also you have the problem of political interference. You wouldn't have had the chaos that you had in the past several years if there wasn't political interference. Now, unless and until you address those problems, you'll continue having a cash-strapped SABC that must all the time run to the government for funding.
William Bird, are you satisfied with the minister's explanation that the turnaround strategy is not sufficient?
No. I think it's, broadly speaking, a little bit embarrassing for our minister that she was in Parliament last week when she had already received this letter. That wasn't declared to Parliament as far as I'm aware.
A discrepancy of the dates.
And that should have been declared and said, look, here, I'm playing open cards with the people of South Africa and Parliament.
This is what Treasury
to
says.
Say these are the reasons. And it's not clear what those reasons are, because what you saw in another report is that the SABC have complied. They've complied with the various elements that Treasury has demanded. So quite why the SABC is not getting this guarantee is quite extraordinary, especially when any other SOE, they just have to laugh or cough in a bucket, and they get billions in a literal bailout. This is a guarantee that is being asked for, not a bailout. So those kinds of things, it's just something just doesn't add up, and it feels like us as ordinary members of the public, they're trying to pull the wool over our eyes and make us think that something else is going on, when it seems a fairly clear situation. The SABC is in dire financial straits. Government has known about this for over a year. They continue to fail to act, and you have to ask, why is it that they are trying to push the SABC to the absolute brink before they're willing to actually move and do something, especially when all the indications, especially the ones that we've seen there, are things that the SABC in the last 12 months has moved very clearly and firmly on. They've done extensive work around rebuilding their credibility as a news organization. They covered the elections better than almost every other media in this entire country on a hamstring budget. They've done all sorts of good things in terms of trying to rebuild themselves as an entity. They've launched their own app. They're moving in all sorts of places that are doing things. They've saved R1 billion worth of money. Show me any other public funded entity that is able to demonstrate that track record that hasn't been given the money. Again, the question is, why aren't they giving them the money?
So why are they, as you say, pushing the SABC to the brink? Is it that political interference narrative?
Look, it could be a way of punishing the SABC if maybe somebody thinks that the SABC is not doing
to achieve what in the end?
Well, we can only speculate. But I think, you know, if you look at the problems that the country is facing, almost all the state-owned entities are owing, almost all of them are cash-strapped. And, you know, maybe you look at the SABC and say, well, for as long as it keeps doing what it's doing, let's see how far they can go. I don't think that there is a political, you know, reason, a deeper one or a cynical one to maybe to break down the SABC. I think it's just really...
I think that's important to highlight.
Yes, yeah.
Obi Chabalala, you're with the Communication Workers Union. You're obviously worried for the workers within the SABC and especially your membership.
Oh yes, we are indeed worried, extremely when we get these mixed messages. I'll take you back to March, where there was a commitment from the state that there will be funding going to SABC. At that stage, we were also told that it is at a sensitive stage, money is about to be given, and later on, boom, the money is not there and so on. But also what the Treasury says, contrary to what the ruling party have resolved in their own conference on funding the SABC and even extending the bailout and so forth.
So again, that conversation about conference deliberations and outcomes.
Absolutely. And I mean, SABC has been clearly outlined that is a public broadcaster. The state has a responsibility to keep it afloat. Yes, we agree that it should be self-sustainable and all of those things, but in the main, the state as the main shareholder cannot keep us at ransom, because that's exactly what they are doing now. Last month we were complaining whether the salaries will come or not. We have not paid critical stakeholders like Centec, like your electricity bills and so forth. That shows that somehow SABC might be pressured to comply with whatever that we're not so sure what it is.
Gentlemen, are you satisfied that the SABC has done enough to get itself out of this position when you take away the financing conversation?
Look, I mean, as William has said, I think the SABC has regained its credibility. I think, you know, you're doing a good work in terms of news coverage and all that. For me, I think the problem is you've got to attend to the structural problems, because it's the structural problems that cause the SABC to be dysfunctional. You can't have an organization which is the biggest media organization in the country, and maybe south of the Sahara, and you cannot, with this big platform and so many people that are watching, that are consuming your products every day, I don't think that you should be having the problems that I think what another biggest problem that the SABC is facing is this failure to think out of the box. You know, one of the biggest... And
respond to recent challenges.
Because, I mean, look, you cannot run the business as the SABC. I mean, I used to work here from 1995. Nothing has changed in how the SABC does its work. In a world that is fast changing, fourth industrial revolution, you're still stuck in 1999 in how you're conducting your business.
That's one of the arguments that Treasury is using, that there has been so much development in ICT.
Absolutely. Let me make an example. One of the biggest drivers right,
Whose
is
fault is that?
for the costing of the SABC, is buying content. Right. If you take a guy like Robert Marawa, for instance, now, he's not attached to any TV station.
And
You've got the
content.
platforms. You've got the platforms, and he's got the numbers. He can bring the numbers for you. But you are going to say, we don't have money to pay him. He's an entrepreneur. You can get into an arrangement with him that he gives you content and you share, maybe you split advertising spend or something like that. So I'm saying there are innovative ways. The SABC does not innovate anymore. It used to innovate. It doesn't innovate anymore. That's why it's losing market share.
Let's bring in Mpumzi Zuzile into this conversation, who wrote that article we spoke about at the beginning of the conversation. A very good evening to you, Mpumzi, and thanks for joining us. Before we go into the content of the article, let's just touch on 2 points. One, the authenticity of the letter, because we're finding officials not wanting to confirm or deny, but also the discrepancy with the dates, that the minister would go to Parliament and present a different argument when she has a letter stating something else.
Thanks, Deidre. The letter is authentic. The spokesperson for the ministry, without too many words, confirmed that they have received correspondence on that particular date from Treasury, and that the minister is still engaging with Treasury and will further communicate in relation to the outcome of that, on the contents of that letter at a later date.
So why?
So the letter is authentic.
So why then did she choose to leave out the content of this letter in explaining to Parliament why money was not forthcoming for the SABC?
Unfortunately, Deidre, I wasn't part of the standing committee where she was talking. But in the letter, the Minister of Finance, Tito Mboweni, does state that the crisis facing SABC did not derive from an issue of lack of funding, but it's a result of years of neglect in ensuring that the entity, its business model, its operations, and the policy and regulations were positioned to withstand and take advantage of within the industry. Like one of Makosini has said earlier, that the issues at SABC are more on structural, more than financial. And the Minister of Finance does say in that letter to Minister Ndabeni that those are some of the problems facing SABC.
Mpumzi, thank you so much for your time tonight. Let's take a short break. We'll continue with the discussion when we come back.
There's been an escalation in gang shootings in areas such as the Cape Flats.
When the rule of law starts disappearing, we all worry. We don't want another Brazil, Lavelas, where gangs control everything.
The purpose of this train ride, is it purely just to get first-hand experience of what commuters go through?
He made it very clear just now that he will not leave here shocked. He is well aware of those challenges.
My mandate from the President is to fix this.
One of the questions, of course, speaks to the practicality of this introduction of the new Zimbabwean dollar. What is its worth?
In a nutshell, this is, it has got a lot of disadvantages to the people in the country. At the end of the day, we'll have uprisings in the streets.
I'm saying to you, you cannot show a middle finger to a Chapter 9 institution.
I want you that I'll switch off the mic.
Okay.
Yes, take your seat.
We will wait outside. When the constitutional delinquent finishes, we'll come back.
On a point of order.
Mama, tell me a story.
My child, I have a great story to tell you. Although we come from humble beginnings, we've done legendary things.
South Africa have won the 1996 African Cup of Nations.
Our lands are full of wonders. Even though sometimes things don't go our way, we find inner strength to persevere and push forward. We dress up for the occasion. Oh, how we love to dance and sing. We've seen our fair share of victories and disappointments. But we thrive when we are together. And that, my dear child, is the beautiful story of Africa.
SABC is the official broadcaster of AFCON 2019, Africa's beautiful story.
Thanks for staying with us, and thanks for your interaction on our social media platforms regarding a conversation we're having today about the SABC. Gentlemen, welcome once again. We've spoken about the reasons why the financial assistance is not being advanced to the SABC. Let's try to talk about the way forward. How do we break this impasse, Makosini?
Look, I think that the government must come to the party and make sure that this entity, which is very important, that millions of people rely for information, news and entertainment, that it is saved. But the SABC
but also to make decisions about
but the SABC
direction.
cannot continue this way. It cannot continue this way. I think there must be an out-of-the-box thinking. I think there must be some enterprising attitude at the SABC, because you've got the platforms. I mean, the SABC 1 is the biggest terrestrial TV station in the country. There is no reason why the SABC should be broke. It's got, of the 10 biggest radio stations in the country, only one, Gagasi FM, is not owned by the SABC. There's no reason for the SABC to be broke. Fix the structural problems, get in competent people at the SABC, and the politicians must leave the SABC to competent people to run it and not interfere.
William, you're more a content man, but in terms of the business assets of the SABC, could this have an impact on these decisions that are being taken?
So clearly there's a need to fundamentally alter the way in which the SABC operates. No one in the sector who has any kind of vague grasp of this doesn't think that there needs to be significant shifts. You know, it's been allowed deliberately to stay in a lurch from crisis to crisis to crisis to serve very narrow political ends. And this is the consequence of that, is that it hasn't been able to develop. But it's not only the SABC that needs to think out of the box. Government needs to think out of the box. That letter displays an embarrassing lack of understanding of the role of the SABC. And it can't have been written by the minister, because it says the SABC is the implementing agent of the Department of Communication.
I know.
That is about as far away from the mandate of the SABC as you could ever hope to get, unless you're talking about state television, which is a fundamentally different thing. Yes. So clearly there's a lot more going on here behind the scenes than we're being allowed to see. Parliament needs to get to the bottom of this, and they need to be making sure that this stuff is put out in the open and that we understand it. To this point, I'm not clear. What we have seen is extensive plans put out by the board. They're on Parliament's website. You can go and get all of those things and you can see them. What we haven't seen are legitimate critiques that says these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things are the problems we have with your plan. Specific things that we have that are problems with it. You can't say, oh, these are structural issues that are there, because you could level exactly those same complaints against every single public-owned entity in this country, and yet still they get bailouts. This is a guarantee, not a bailout, and still the SABC is being pushed to the brink.
Aubrey, one of the things the minister mentioned during the week in her address to Parliament was the concerns about the bloated workforce, and this got internally in the SABC people really enraged, because people were saying, just look at the past year, so many people have left, talented people have left the SABC, some people have resigned, and a lot of people, there's been the strive to encourage people to go on retirement, which has happened. Are we still a bloated workforce?
Well, firstly, we can't thumbsuck information. We have people who have left SABC because of natural attrition, others resigned voluntarily. So we have dropped numbers significantly. And we have been advocate of saying we need to do the HR auditing so that we know what we're talking about, which people are which place, what skills do we need and so forth. We even went further of talking about skills audit. But going back to the issue of structural, hearing from the minister's letter now, You'll recall that we are being delayed to move on the digital migration, which could have assisted SABC by now in terms of creating new financial streams. But that has not been done. And who has been delaying that? The answer is there. Basically, those are the issues that we need to drill into it. So you cannot therefore say, on the basis that it's a nice thing to say that the staff has been bloated. Why is it been bloated? Because we've been seeing people leaving. Vacancies have not been filled at the lower level. Whilst they've been filled at management level, but not in all areas.
In fact, the letter talks about a moratorium on filling the vacancies for now.
Absolutely. But we have further said that once we've done the skills audit, we can be able to say which areas needs to be uplifted in terms of advancing workers in that space, and which areas needs more workers, so that we don't lose the talent that we already have by just removing people and saying now we are retrenching, because the risk about that, you might lose the talent that you really need at SABC.
Absolutely.
The Democratic Alliance member in the Communications Portfolio Committee in Parliament, Phumzile van Dam, has said that the minister is allowing her personal feelings to affect her oversight of the SABC turnaround strategy. Your thoughts?
Look, I would want a situation, ideally, a situation where the minister becomes as involved as little as possible in the operations of the SABC. You need to have a competent executive and a competent and independent board that does its work. But sometimes the executives and the board make decisions that beg for government to intervene. For instance, if you're going to talk about retrenchments, and just say in an environment where there's already high unemployment and government cannot be looking at state-owned entities to be the ones that are retrenching when they're fighting mining companies that are retrenching. I'm saying you cannot just go and talk about that. Was, I think, a failure, a serious failure on the part of the executive and the board to say there are going to be retrenchments, you're beating down morale and all those things. So if you say that the staff is bloated, you've got to identify where there is oversupply of staff. But when I come here to people who really do the work, journalists, technical people, I don't see anything bloated. In fact, I see people working on a shoestring budget, in my view.
You're watching Unfiltered, the conversation about the SABC. Can we afford a failed SABC? That's our question tonight. Join us after this break for a continuation of this conversation.
One diamond as huge as 490 carat of stone found in the open prior 1868 gave them the interest to dig. Extracted from 22.5 million tons of soil. Today the hole sits at a breathtaking 214 meters deep. Kimberley Big Hole attracts tourists from all over the world, taking a vintage tram past the city, then cycling around the Big Hole.
Mama, tell me a story.
My child, I have a great story to tell you. Although we come from humble beginnings, we've done legendary things.
South Africa have won the 1996 African Cup of Nations.
Our lands are full of wonder. Even though sometimes things don't go our way, we find inner strength to persevere and push forward. We dress up for the occasion. Oh, how we love to dance and sing. We've seen our fair share of victories and disappointments. But we thrive when we are together. And that, my dear child, is the beautiful story of Africa.
SABC is the official broadcaster of AFCON 2019, Africa's beautiful story. SABC is the official broadcaster of AFCON 2019, Africa's beautiful story.
Welcome back and thanks for staying with us for this conversation about the SABC, and we're joined in the studio by I won't say all the names just for the sake of time, but Aubrey, a quick one. What needs to be done now? Are you feeling as a union that government, the SABC and the different stakeholders are sufficiently including you in the conversations about finding solutions for the SABC?
Absolutely not sufficient. We have written a letter already as joint unions at SABC to meet with the Treasury, the Department of Communication and SABC. The SABC recently have responded to us to meet on the 19th in relations to the turnaround strategy which we are going to engage ourselves on, so that we can make certain proposals in terms of the restructuring of SABC. Because accidentally everyone, when you talk about restructuring, they think retrenchment. We think of other device means of building this organization, making sure that it continues to do the work that it's doing even more efficiently. And I think the second part is that partly SABC on the stream, on the OTTs is doing very well. You can find it on the live stream and so forth. So we think that those are the things we can build up on and build this public broadcaster furthermore.
You were saying that earlier on other entities are being, William, they're being helped out. But now the part of the letter says the fiscal constraints, which there are fiscal constraints within Treasury which do not allow for ongoing bailouts. Is this unfair?
Fundamentally, as I've said, it displays an embarrassing absence of understanding of the role of the public broadcaster and its importance to our democracy. And we saw that in the elections period. You know, no other entity could have delivered the elections and ensured that they were free and fair other than the public broadcaster. And they did that, and they did that with great talent and skill. That's an amazing thing. The thing that's so deeply concerning about this is that this is a really good news story for South Africa. We had an entity that in 2016 onwards was a complete disaster. The SABC, within its own resources, with its own people, has managed to turn it around to the extent that they're looking to the future, looking at doing all of these cool things, and still they're not getting the money. The answer is simple. Give them the money. A new spanner in the works, concerns about the building being unsafe. And no funds to maintain the building.
No, look, I mean, I can speak for myself. I used to work here. I left here in 2003. I mean, this building is just in a sorry state. It's a shade of its former self. I can't believe, really, that the building has been allowed to deteriorate.
Gentlemen,
to this
just
point.
A quick one. What difficult decisions need to be made to take the SABC forward? Aubrey, we'll start with you.
Well, first and foremost, we need to say the Treasury must give SABC money for immediate bailout. That is critical for us. The second point is that we need to speed up on fast track on the issue of turnaround strategy jointly so that SABC can move on. I think those are two critical areas.
Give us exactly the documents and written terms of what's wrong with SABC's turnaround strategy. Let's make that stuff public. If you can't make it public, then make sure they get the guarantee.
Yes, give the SABC money and make sure that you really leverage the strength that it has. It's got the numbers, it's got the viewers, it's got the listeners. There's no need, it's got the infrastructure. There's no need for the SABC to be broke.
William Bird and Aubrey Chabalala, thank you so much for making the time this evening. This has been your Unfiltered for tonight. My name is Desiree. Ciao, get a good night.
Keep fighting, everyone. You have to keep going.
Give us money.
SABC is the official